Now, for those of you that watch the live stream, you are aware of the fact that I've been playing the balanced test mode quite a little bit as of late. I've been playing all three races, I've been playing all matchups, and I've been trying to make sense of the changes that Blizzard is planning to make to the multiplayer version of StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void. Now, what I got for you today is a little bit of a strange Zerg vs Zerg. Now, here is the goal for the multiplayer changes that they're planning, okay? So, as you may be aware, at the professional level for 1 versus 1, the game is practically balanced right now. All three races are doing very well, but there's one issue. Some things just don't see any kind of playtime whatsoever. For example, while Terran is doing very well right now and Terran players are winning a lot of tournaments, generally speaking, all of the Terran players are playing one kind of army only, and that is going to be biological based armies. So that would mean like Marine Marauder Medevac, and then maybe some mines and siege tanks added to that as well. And maybe later on into the game, we see Liberator play too. However, generally speaking, that's what all of the armies are based around. And here's the thing that Blizzard is trying to do with the balanced test mode. Basically, they're looking at underperformance segments of the game and are buffing those a bunch, and they're changing up a couple of things to make the game a little bit more interesting, such as, for example, mechanical units for Terran. Now, Zerg also has got its fair share of underperforming segments, okay? Most of the game is really dominated right now by either Mutaling Bane and then into Ultralisk in the late game, or Roach Ravager Hydra Lurker or so into Ultralisk in the late game. And while we do see units such as, you know, Infestors pop up every now and then, and Corruptors got their place as well, and, you know, some units really do see their place every now and then, they're trying to make a change to one unit that doesn't see play ever, at the very least not at the professional level, and that is going to be the Swarm Host. Now, the Swarm Host, generally speaking, you don't make unless you accidentally use the hotkey. There have been a couple of games where I make Swarm Host, and I don't actually plan on making them. I just accidentally use them because I plan to make Infestor, for example, and I used the wrong hotkey, just because I don't play Infestor nearly as much as I should either. But generally speaking, Infestor, or like not the Infestor, sorry, the Swarm Host is a complete novelty type unit. Now, here's the changes that they are making to the Swarm Host in the balanced test mode. First and foremost, they're making the unit significantly cheaper. Right now in the balanced test mode, it's 100 minerals and 75 gas, which is just a lot cheaper than the actual unit in the live version of the game. But secondly, they also are increasing the swoop range of the actual flying Locust. And what this means is that the Locust will now be able to swoop down a little bit easier when they are seeing a target that they can be attacking. Now, I have been trying my very best to make the unit work, and I've been trying to make it work in particular in Zerg vs Zerg. Now, like I said, you know, some unit compositions and some armies and some buildings and some, you know, general strategies, I suppose, are underperforming. But there's one thing that we have to keep in mind as well. Zerg vs Zerg is going to be affected by this as well. Obviously, if they're making changes to, for example, you know, the Baneling, which is the case as of today, the Baneling has a little bit more sustain, that immediately is going to be affecting Zerg vs Protoss and Zerg vs Terran as well. And while the balance won't really change as far as Zerg vs Zerg goes, it does sort of limit the choices that you have in ZVZ, right? We gotta keep in mind that all of the changes that are being made to promote the other matchups, so be it Terran versus Protoss, be it Zerg vs Protoss, be it Zerg vs Terran as well, all of those changes are also going to be affecting the mirror matchups. And in particular, as of late, I've been having a lot of trouble in all of the mirror matchups, as they don't really make a whole lot of sense anymore. Now, Zerg vs Zerg, as it is right now in the balanced test mode, is very much so dominated by Zerg and Baneling Micro. Now, what this means is that obviously Banelings just simply become more powerful, and since Link Baneling is already in the current version of Legacy of the Void the standard go-to strategy as well, it's only going to make that sort of playstyle even more common as well, right? So here's what I've been trying to do. I've been trying to play hyper-defensive styles to give the Swarm Host a try. And whether or not it's a good idea, I can't tell you, but this is going to be a master level Zerg vs Zerg, where the game is a little bit strange, is a little bit wonky, and my opponent is gonna have a significant advantage as far as the actual economy goes. But here's my thought process. So the ultimate end-all be-all composition for Zerg, generally speaking, is something based around Ultralisk and Queen. At the very least in this matchup, Ultralisk and Queens do extremely well. And while there definitely are unit compositions that obviously counter that, such as for example like heavy Brute Lord play, I found that composition to do extremely well. But here's the thing, obviously going up to that unit composition is going to take you a very long time. Generally speaking, getting those units out is just simply taking a very, very long time, and usually you're not gonna get at that point in the game. But what I've been trying to do as of late is make swarm hosts work and try and use them as sort of like a stepping stone to stay alive until Ultralisks come out. Now, I can't really tell you whether or not any other unit is going to be more useful in that, but I can tell you that the swarm host actually does surprisingly well. It actually deals with all of the incoming aggression, and I've been using it as like a defensive unit. The swarm host right now is so very cheap that you can just make a couple of them and not really be all too affected by it. So for example, instead of going for a Spire, which is very, very common obviously, going for the Spire and then into a Hive and Ultralisk, instead of going for the Spire, I decided to go for a Infestation Pit very, very early on, tech straight towards the Hive, and just simply keep on pumping Queens here to try and stay alive. So as you can see right now, I've made a lot of Spine Crawlers, I've got a bunch of Queens, obviously Transfuse is going to start building up, and I'm trying my very best to keep all of my Queens alive here to the best of my abilities. Now, obviously I've been also trying to get the biggest economy that I can. But while my opponent is only just now getting up his Spire, I'm already going up to Hive. Now, he does get some nice detonations here, and all in all, you know, he is looking pretty powerful, but here are the swarm hosts. I got a couple of them here already. Still have more spine crawlers building as well, just to try and deal with these kind of run-bys with Zerglings as well as with potential Banelings and all that. But here are, you know, the swarm hosts coming out. Now, initially, my thought process right here was to try and use them offensively, right? But I found out after playing a couple of games that they seem to be far better at being defensive units. I mean, I've stopped Roach aggression with it, I've stopped Zergling Baneling aggression with it, and I've stopped all kinds of other units with it as well. It does really, really well, as the little, like, the damage output of the little Locust is absolutely ridiculous. You just gotta keep in mind that if your opponent is being smart about it and, you know, playing around these sort of styles, they may very well be able to still, you know, stop you relatively easily. But I've found so far that people are just simply not expecting the unit all too much, and are not assuming you're gonna be using the swarm host defensively. So at this point in the game, as you can see, I got my Ultralisk Cavern going down, and I've got a whole lot of Queens already as well. I've got 7 at this point, adding on more and more and more of them, just trying to save up transfuses here, trying to make sure that we don't lose any of them, obviously, if we can at all avoid that. And I'm using the Spine Crawlers defensively as well. Now, as you may have noticed on the minimap, or on the production tab rather, my opponent is indeed trying to transition right now towards Mutalisk too. But at this point, while the Mutas are flying across the map, I obviously already have a whole lot of Queens out that are going to be able to deal with the incoming forces of the Mutalisk, and I will be able to start getting my Ultralisk very, very, very shortly. Now, this definitely is a build that requires a little bit more practice, but I would say that the swarm hosts are doing pretty damn good. They actually are keeping me alive, and they are dealing with a lot of the incoming aggression just by simply positioning them properly. Now, whether or not they are the best unit for trying to deal with the different kinds of aggression, I can't really tell you. Maybe I would have been better off just going for the roaches as well, but they have been doing better than I thought they would. I mean, they're very, very cheap right now, and since you're getting the Infestation Pit anyway to tech up towards the Hive, you may as well just get yourself a couple of swarm hosts to use defensively, as they do rather well. Now, I am running across the map here, trying to buy myself a little bit of time, getting the Adrenal Glands upgrade now that we are at Hive as well, and still producing more and more Queens. Now, one thing to note is that I really haven't gotten any kind of Evolution Chamber upgrades, nor do I, you know, have a big economy. If you have a quick look right now at the minimap, my opponent has taken 6 bases right now, which obviously is not all that great. And while he has been throwing away a lot of units thus far as the supply counts go, it's only looking slightly in my favor. And the reason for that is simply that I haven't really been taking any kind of major losses, right? Like, he's managed to kill 18 workers here in total, but I've simply just replaced all of those. And honestly, my advantage doesn't necessarily lie in the economy, like I normally focus on when I play Zerg, but it really lies in the fact that I've just simply got a lot more tech than my opponent, right? I'm getting the chitinous plating upgrade right now, I'm getting my adrenal glands upgrade right now, and I'm trying to get my Ultralisk out. Right now, you could do a similar build as well in Legacy of the Void just as it is, but I found it to be very, very difficult to pull off, as the cost is just simply too big. I mean, getting 10 swarm hosts is quite a big investment in Legacy of the Void as it is right now, whereas in the current version of the multiplayer, it's just more expensive, right? Like in this current version of the balanced test mod, it really isn't all too big of a deal. Now, as you may be noticing on the production tab, my opponent has decided that he's gonna base his army around Hydralisk as well as roaches, and I am already marching across the map. I have got my Ultralisk out, and while my supply count isn't the biggest, and while my units aren't, in that big of a number, I suppose, I have managed to hold on to my 3 bases, which is really all you need to max out on Ultralisk, Queen, and Zerglings and Swarm Host. And I've noticed that once you get to this point in the game where you are marching across the map, it really doesn't matter what kind of an army your opponent got. I mean, I'm trying to add on some more static defense, and I'm by no means playing this one out perfectly. But the Swarm Hosts are really carrying their weight. They're really making sure that I stay alive here while I'm trying to move across the map and try and deal with the aggression that my opponent has. Now, he is being quite a pain here with the units that he does indeed have, and the mutas are doing a lot of damage, and I'm forced to split up my forces. But my queens are on the other side of the map. They obviously do benefit from the creep that my opponent has spread as well, and I'm gonna be able to, at the very least, deal with a chunk of his army. Now, here's the funny part, though. Here's the funny part. Once you get to this point in the game, Ultralisk and Swarm Host just absolutely shred through the army that my opponent has. Now, as you can see, I'm not controlling my Swarm Host particularly well, but the Ultralisk in particular do insane amounts of damage. I mean, Hydralisk are good as they are doing a lot of damage, but if the Ultralisk manage to close the distance, as you can see, I'm trying to transfuse my Ultras right now to the best of my abilities, they're just simply gonna chomp their way through the forces that my opponent has. And it turns out that if it's 6 bases versus 3, but you have an army that is very, very, very properly upgraded, it doesn't really matter how many workers you end up losing. I mean, I ended up losing 43 workers in this match. Now, I can't tell you whether or not Swarm Hosts are actually going to have their place in the matchup, nor can I tell you if they're going to be a go-to unit, but I can tell you that they definitely seem more powerful than they ever have been, and they're worth testing out. Even if it's gonna be a novelty unit and they need a little bit of a buff in another scenario as well, they are surprisingly good at holding on to several bases, at the very least in Zerg vs. Zerg. And other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, okay? And I will see you in the next one.